Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and I'm back. And I saw an article produced recently about the Washington football team possibly having a top 5 offensive line. We're going to dive into all of that, like the catalyst for the video. We're going to look at that article. We're going to look at a few more articles that feel the same and agree. And then I'm also going to break down each offensive lineman on this team who's expected to play a large role in this 2021 offense, as well as who's competing. Because there's some guys that are projected to not start that have starter level talent. There's some special talents on this team that, if everybody stays healthy, which isn't very likely, could actually step up and play at a almost Pro Bowl level, maybe even Pro Bowl. We'll see. Again, we're going to dive into all of the advanced analytics, the Pro Football Focus grades, and several articles concerning the offensive line to truly figure out if we do have a top 5 offensive line, or at the very least very underrated, because a lot of people think our offensive line is terrible, potentially the worst in the division. And that's wild. But hey, man, before we get into the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Also, make sure you go check out the rest of the channel. All of my videos are organized in playlists. I even have a comedy playlist for all of my funny videos. So again, make sure you go check out the rest of the channel, as well as hitting that bell next to the subscription button. And without further ado, man, let's get it. All right, so since we're talking about the offensive line, I'm putting on this burgundy and gold versus Cowboys Thanksgiving game because this is one of their best overall performances as a team. I mean, as an entire offensive line. Plus, it's just fun to watch the burgundy and gold beat the Cowboys, especially in Dallas. So that's actually one of the main reasons, I'm not gonna lie, that I put this on. But hey, look at the offensive line at the same time. Look at what they're doing. But yeah, man, this all started when the Pro Football Network broke down the best offensive lines in the NFL, and they ranked us 3rd, like literally the number 3. They said that the Saints will have the best, the Cowboys will be the 2nd best if healthy, we would be 3rd. That's ahead of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Ravens, the Browns, the Chiefs. I mean, that Chiefs O-line looks revamped. I mean, they have potentially 2 Pro Bowlers and an All-Pro. I mean, it's crazy. The New England Patriots, the Rams, and the Packers, that fills out the top 10. But again, the most notable thing is that number 3 is the Washington football team. They said the Washington football team will return 4 of their 5 starters in 2021. The only change is the addition of Charles Leno, who replaces Morgan Moses. Leno has an opportunity to be an upgrade on Moses, which would make an impressive line all the way across. Leno can slot in at the left tackle position he is familiar with, and Cornelius Lucas switching to the right tackle. Or Leno may make the switch to right tackle and leave Lucas on the left side. Plying that left tackle last season, Lucas was impressive last season. He had just 8 blown blocks and over 500 snaps and was credited with just 2 sacks. In fact, the entire remainder of the line had a blown block rate of 2%. The quality of Brandon Sheriff is well known, while Chase Roulier has become one of the best centers in the league. Furthermore, Wes Schweitzer impressed in his first season with Washington with just 16 blown blocks on 931 snaps. And then the Football Outsiders also have their advanced analytics, NFL offensive line continuity scores. From 2020, we had the 7th best continuity. And what that means is, how many times was that same exact offensive line out there? There's supposed to be 5 starters. We had 9 offensive linemen start through, various injuries and things like that. We had 5 offensive line changes, and the longest stretch that we had the same 5 offensive linemen out there was 5 games, and that ranked us 7th in the NFL as far as continuity goes. So we may complain about injuries and all of these other factors that may go on in the NFL, but at the end of the day, last year our offensive line was the 7th most consistent as far as being there. We could again debate, we're gonna break a lot of that down as far as how good they were, but as far as just being available and continuity, we had the 7th best offensive line last year. And then you have the Pro Football Focus, who ranked us the 6th best offensive line last year. And this was at the end of the season. This is before we picked up Charles Leno. This is before we drafted Samuel Cosmi. This is before we brought back Eric Flowers. And all three of these guys are starting level talents with, Pro Bowl potential, especially Samuel Cosmi if he's able to reach his potential. Not betting on it, not saying it's very likely, but the ridiculous potential is easily there, without question. Pro Football Focus's reasoning coming in at 29th on the preseason edition of these rankings, so that's definitely the biggest jump. Going from 29th at the beginning of the season to 6th by the end of the season is crazy. Washington presents one of the biggest surprises of the regular season with their play up front. The biggest question mark coming into the year surrounded who would win the left tackle job. Jerron Christian won the job and started there for 6 games before being placed on injured reserve with a knee injury. Still, his replacement, Cornelius Lucas, actually provided some stability at the position with a 78.3 overall grade and an 83.1 grade in pass protection that ranked 11th at the position over the regular season. Then they also said solid play from Lucas and Wes Schweitzer on the left side, paired with top 10 grades from each of Chase Roulier, Brandon Sheriff, and Morgan Moses at the other starting spots, resulted in a much improved group from a season ago. Roulier recently got his long-term extension to stay in Washington, and Sheriff will be looking for the same this offseason. I mean, that part is looking bleak right there, but at least we're going to have Brandon Sheriff for the 2021 season. And then the Huddle ranked us 18th, and they gave us some advanced stats for our offensive line. Yards per carry, 4.1, was 23rd out of all offensive lines in 2020. Yards before contact, 2.2, that was 25th. Negative runs, 31, that was 13th in the NFL. Negative run percentage with 9%, that was 12th in the NFL. Sacks allowed, 50, that was 31st in the NFL. Sack rate, 8%, was 26th in the NFL. Percentage of pass plays that resulted in a hit, hurry, or a sack was 29%, which is 22nd in the NFL. Again, I'm providing sides of both cases. I'm not just going to give y'all a whole bunch of, the Washington football team has the best O-line ever stats. There's also advanced stats that show that we actually don't, and the Huddle provided those stats. But continuing on, Football Outsiders also just has a whole bunch of crazy advanced statistics. And in 2020, the Washington football team offensive line ranked 7th in power success rate. And a power success rate is the percentage of runs on 3rd or 4th down, 2 yards or less to go, that resulted in a first down or a touchdown. Again, our offensive line ranked 7th in that advanced statistic. We ranked 16th in second level yards rank. We ranked 11th in stuffed rate, and stuffed rate is the percentage of carries by running backs that are stopped at or before the line of scrimmage. We were 11th in the NFL at that, so that's also really good. And there's a whole bunch of just advanced statistics you can look up about this offensive line, especially on Football Outsiders, but those are just some of the notable ones. And then Pro Football Focus said entering the 2021 season that we are the 16th best offensive line in the NFL. They said Washington's offensive line was a pleasant surprise a year ago. So that's really interesting that before the draft and before free agency, we were 6th. And then after adding Samuel Cosmi, Charles Leno, getting Sadiq Charles back healthy, bringing back Eric Flowers, and only losing Morgan Moses, somehow we went from 6th to 16th. I don't know if that means just a lot of other offensive lines improved that much, but Pro Football Focus, the same guys that said at the end of last season we were the 6th best offensive line in the NFL, has us ranked 16th going into the 2021 season. But now it's time to take a look at the offensive linemen specifically. Of course, we got to start with Brandon Sheriff. Brandon Sheriff is coming off of a career-high 86.3 grade from Pro Football Focus last year. He also, of course, missed a couple of games, but for the most part, he was there the majority of the season. He was one of only 3 guards to achieve both an 80-plus pass blocking grade and run blocking grade in 2020. So that's really high praise right there. And then, of course, he made first team All-Pro. So that made things more difficult for us as far as trying to re-sign him long term. But hey, man, he went out there and did his thing. Brandon Sheriff has only allowed 5 sacks on 1,218 pass blocking snaps since 2018. That is crazy. And also, Brandon Sheriff is at his best at FedEx Field. Through his career on FedEx Field, playing at home, through 1,647 pass blocking snaps, he's only allowed 4 sacks. So at home, Brandon Sheriff is pretty much just one of the best offensive linemen in the league. Then you also have Chase Roulier. Pro Football Focus graded him a 77.2 grade last season, which was 4th amongst all centers. Chase Roulier is definitely a top 5 center in the NFL. That's not even to be argued. He also had a 79 pass blocking grade last year, which was second among centers. So I guess his run blocking is what held him back a little bit, because he has the second highest pass blocking grade, but he's the 4th overall center. But then when you look at advanced statistics, Chase Roulier had the second highest run block win rate as a center in the NFL. Corey Linsley of the Packers was the only one ahead of him. Corey Linsley was number 1 with 77%. Chase Roulier was 76%. Jason Kelsey was 3rd with 75%. Frank Ragnow and Nick Martin were 4th and 5th with 74%. And it just keeps going down and down and down. So if he's the second best pass blocking center in the NFL, and according to advanced statistics, the second best run blocking center in the NFL, it sounds like he's the second best center in the NFL, period. So he's holding it down in the middle, right to the left for Brandon Sheriff. Then you also have Cornelius Lucas, who was a pleasant surprise last year. Last year, he finished with an overall grade of 78.3, which was 23rd amongst NFL tackles, but his pass blocking grade was an 83.1, which was 14th out of all NFL tackles in the NFL. And again, I mean, we didn't even go into the season assuming he would be the starter. He started the season as a backup. Just another pleasant surprise. And then he also finished last year with a 4.09 pressure rate allowed, which was 18th in the NFL. Not bad as well. Cornelius Lucas's last 733 pass blocking snaps, he only allowed 4 sacks, 5 QB hits, 1 penalty. He's literally like a top 15 pass blocking tackle in the NFL, in my opinion. Just got to get that run blocking better. But if you remember, week 9 last year, Cornelius Lucas finished with an 86.1 grade, the highest of any tackle in the NFL that week. So he was the best tackle in the NFL week 9 in that loss against the New York Giants. Lord of mercy. Then you have Wes Schweitzer, who held it down at left guard all last year, and he was a backup for the Falcons. I mean, like, I don't know how he ended up being this good, because the Falcons O-line wasn't even good, and to be a backup on an already bad offensive line is just wild. So when we picked him up, I didn't think much of him, but he actually played well last year. He finished last year with a 69 overall grade, and in week 11 he had a 93.7 grade, which was the second best grade in the NFL, like, period, regardless of position, offense, defense, whatever. The only player in the NFL to have a higher grade than Wes Schweitzer in week 11 was Deshaun Watson, and that was that ugly, gritty game against the Bengals. And then you have Sadiq Charles, who's coming back from injury, technically a red-shirted rookie, because I mean, we saw him for maybe 3 snaps last year, and that maybe even including practice. But he was well known to be the biggest steal of the 4th round in the 2019 draft. I mean, you could argue he should have been a 1st rounder. It was just off the field concerns. But if we're just talking about pure talent, pure natural God-given ability, he was a top at least 6 tackle in the NFL draft in 2019, and we got him in the 4th round. And most of those other guys went all in the 1st round. I feel like at the very least he should have gone in the 2nd round, but again, off the field concerns. But we've clearly seen now that he doesn't have those. But also, speaking of Sadiq Charles, January 13th, 2020, in those playoffs against the Clemson Tigers, a really tough defensive line, top 5 defensive line in college football that year, Sadiq Charles surrendered 0 pressures across 61 pass blocking snaps. He was the only offensive lineman with an elite pass block grade that game. He was the best offensive lineman on the field between Clemson and LSU. He showed up the best, had the biggest day. I mean, if you think about it, Joe Burrow led that LSU team to having arguably the best offense in college football history, and Sadiq Charles was the starting left tackle on that historical offense. That has to mean something, especially when they were doing it. It wasn't like they were playing for Oklahoma and going against lesser defensive lines. They were playing in the SEC. They had to go against Georgia, Alabama, the better teams in the college football players like Clemson, Florida, Mississippi State. Sadiq Charles was doing it against the best of the best defensive linemen in college football that year. Without him, Joe Burrow would have had a very different looking season, I can tell you that. And this is a guy that's almost an afterthought to most even Washington football team fans. And also against my Georgia Bulldogs specifically, who along with the Clemson Tigers, who I just talked about, had a top 5 defensive line that year. And Sadiq Charles earned a 74.5 pass blocking grade and only gave up 3 pressures. Still not as great as his game against Clemson, but that's still a really good game against, again, 2 top 5 defensive lines in football that year. And also, to end the season, Pro Football Focus gave him a 70.5 pass blocking grade and a flat out 70 run blocking grade, which is pretty good. I think it should have been higher, especially if you look at it with context against who he was going against literally the best defensive lines in football. I think he played his tail off. And then you also have Charles Leno, who we added, coming from the Bears. And according to Pro Football Focus, Charles Leno had the 4th best pass blocking grade out of any offensive tackle in 2020. You have Ronnie Staley with a 90.1, Trent Williams with an 87.8, Andrew Whitworth with an 87.7, and Charles Leno 4th with an 87.6. So, according to Pro Football Focus, Charles Leno was the 4th best pass blocking tackle in the NFL last year. And remember, he was a Pro Bowl alternate in 2018. So it's not even like he just had a flash in the pan, only did it for one season. He's put together multiple seasons of pretty high level play. And then you can't forget Eric Flowers, who we just brought back from the Miami Dolphins. We didn't want to pay him that extra $2 million a year, so he went to the Dolphins to get all of his money, and then we ended up getting him back for extremely cheap. So this is just Ron Rivera playing chess, not checkers. I don't know how he finessed that one. When you really look back at that situation and how we ended up with Eric Flowers anyway, it is crazy because the Miami Dolphins are paying them more to be off their team than we're paying them to play for us on our team. It's crazy. But if you remember, Eric Flowers was the brightest spot on a bad and really hurt offensive line in 2019. I mean, it was basically just him and Chase Roulier holding it down. And we're bringing him back, and he may not even be the day one starter, with Wes Schweitzer right now getting the starting level snaps as far as off-season practices have gone so far. Maybe Eric Flowers beats him out at some point. Maybe Sadiq Charles wins the job. Who knows? But we already know Brandon Sheriff is starting at right guard. We know Chase Roulier is starting at center. I'm expecting Charles Leno to start at left tackle, and it's either going to be Cornelius Lucas or Samuel Cosmi starting at right tackle. And so that Wes Schweitzer, Eric Flowers, and Sadiq Charles having this crazy, extremely underrated camp battle to see who starts at left guard. And then, as I previously alluded to, man, Samuel Cosmi. We got us one in the draft, y'all. I mean, first of all, we took him in the 2nd round. You could argue that was one of the biggest steals in the draft because he has a 9.99 RAS score, which grades his athleticism. That's 9.99 out of 10. That was 2nd out of 1,143 offensive tackles drafted into the NFL since 1987. So he's technically the 2nd most athletic offensive tackle to touch the NFL since 1987. That is crazy. That's just the ultimate elite top tier level of you just take this clay and mold it. And he may not be Bill Callahan, but John Matsko has been doing this thing because remember, like I said earlier, before we got into the specific offensive lineman, we were taking a look at the articles. Before the season started, with who John Matsko had to work with, Pro Football Focus assumed that we would have the 29th best offensive line in the NFL. That's terrible. But we ended up finishing the season with the 6th. And again, there were no personnel changes. Not like we added somebody mid-season after they assumed we would be the 29th ranked offensive line. It wasn't like we picked up a random guy. John Matsko took that 29th ranked talent and turned them into the 6th best offensive line according to Pro Football Focus. So I think if anybody can turn Samuel Cosmi into a great offensive lineman, it's John Matsko, because again, the clay that he has to work with, 2nd most athletic offensive tackle to ever be drafted into the NFL since 1987 is wow. I mean, he's literally more explosive, faster, more agile, and stronger than a Trent Williams. This guy benched 36. Trent Williams only did 23 bench press reps. Again, Samuel Cosmi did 36. That is a huge gap. That is like the difference in strength going from Trent Williams back down to probably like Kirk Cousins. It's almost that big of a gap as far as just bench reps go. Now, I mean, just pure actual strength, if they were wrestling each other, I'm pretty sure it's not that big of a gap. But if we're just going off of combine testing, going from Trent Williams' 23 bench reps to Samuel Cosmi's 36 is a huge gap. And that's more than what JJ Watt did. I mean, a lot of these supposed strongest guys in the NFL didn't bench as much as Samuel Cosmi did in this combine. And again, it's not even just his strength, it's not even just his explosion. He had a 909 broad jump, he had a 439 shuttle, a 7.35 3-cone. He had a 4.87 40-yard dash, a 1.68 10 split. Come on, bro. Like, that's ridiculous. You can see why he was graded the second most athletic tackle to touch the NFL since 1987. You can see it. But on top of that, it's not even like he's just this extremely raw piece of clay. He is fairly raw, and I wouldn't be surprised if Cornelius Lucas starts over him at the beginning of the NFL season. But again, he's not just this super raw guy. Samuel Cosmi was a 3-year starter at Texas. He only allowed 8 pressures and 368 snaps last year. And with his ridiculous explosion and strength, of course he's great in the run game as well, especially potential-wise. But also, Samuel Cosmi graded as the highest pass blocker versus ranked teams in 2020 last year with a 91.3 grade. So whenever it came to offensive linemen blocking against ranked teams in college football against the best of the best, Samuel Cosmi was technically, according to Pro Football Focus, the best offensive lineman in college football. He also finished with the 86.8 zone blocking grade, which is perfect because we love the zone scheme. We ran it 57.4% of the time that we ran the ball last season. So for him to excel in the zone blocking specifically is perfect. And then on top of that, he ended last year with a 90.8 Pro Football Focus grade for his college season. That's top tier elite right there. Like, that was literally 4th out of all offensive tackles in this past draft. Brady Christensen finished with a 95.2 pass blocking grade. Elijah Vera Tucker finished with a 92.8. Christian Darrisaw finished with a 90.8. And Samuel Cosmi, just only 0.1 behind, finished with a 90.7. Again, the 4th highest pass blocking grade amongst all offensive tackles to enter the draft this past draft. So, I mean, if you compile all of that together, it sounds like we have a lot of great pieces to honestly put together a great offensive line this year. Maybe a little bumpy in the beginning, maybe a little ugly as they're trying to gain chemistry as Samuel Cosmi's getting the feel for playing at the NFL level. But if anybody's ready to play at the NFL level to make that transition from college to the NFL, again, it's Samuel Cosmi, because Pro Football Focus literally graded him the best offensive tackle last year against ranked teams. If anybody is ready to make that transition from college to the NFL, it's going to be Samuel Cosmi. And then you're also bringing back Eric Flowers. You're getting Sadiq Charles, again, the starting left tackle on arguably the most explosive, most potent offense in college football history. Joe Burrow never had to worry about his blind side. You add in Charles Leno, who Pro Football Focus felt like was the 4th best pass blocking tackle last year in the NFL. And you're adding all of that to Brandon Sheriff, Wes Schweitzer, Cornelius Lucas. I mean, I do think, in conclusion, in my opinion, we're at least gonna have a top 10 offensive line. Honestly, I'm not sure about 3rd, I'm not sure about 6th, but top 10 definitely. And I mean, it's all an argument as far as the NFC East goes. Maybe on paper the Cowboys may have a better offensive line, but does anybody honestly expect that entire offensive line to stay healthy throughout the NFL season? Because you can maybe say, if healthy, our starting offensive line versus the Cowboys starting offensive line, you could say the Cowboys maybe have the better offensive line on paper. But with them adding a 17th game in the NFL, which offensive line in the NFC East has the best depth? I mean, honestly, which offensive line in the NFL has the best depth? I mean, who has just the best backups that are starting level talents and proven talents at that? You can say it's us easily, especially NFC East wise. So by the time when football really matters and we get to the end of this regular season, even if you say the Cowboys, Eagles, and the Washington football team, we're not even going to consider the Giants, if all of us each lose 3 starters, which offensive line is going to be the best by the end of the season? It's going to be ours easily, because we have the best backups, and on top of that, our offensive line is just overall healthier than both the Cowboys and the Eagles. So if you had to depend on a starting 5 to actually finish the season all healthy together, it's ours. Brandon Sheriff is really the only person holding us back health-wise. But again, this is why I brought this up earlier. We had the 7th best continuity as far as offensive lines go last year. We had the 7th best offensive line when it comes to availability and guys being healthy and us going out there with the same consistent starters week to week. So again, if you had to bet on any offensive line in the NFC East to stay healthy and to keep the exact same 5 that we're starting week 1 with, maybe the only change will happen because Samuel Cosmi just gets better and just outplays Cornelius Lucas at some point and takes over at right tackle potentially. Maybe Sadiq Charles finally turns into that demon that I know he can be and takes over at left guard potentially. Doubt it. I highly doubt it, but you know, that's the only foreseen reasons why there will be some offensive line changes, because again, we have one of the healthier offensive lines in the NFL. It doesn't seem like it when you look at us in a micro view, but if you look at the NFL in a macro view and really look at what all of these teams are dealing with as far as injuries go on the offensive line, we're actually not that bad. Again, 7th best in the NFL. The Giants are actually number 1, which is funny, but they're not even in the conversation as having the top offensive line in the NFC East. So they're just completely disqualified as far as that goes. But between us, the Cowboys, and the Eagles, we by far have the most dependable offensive line in this division health-wise. I mean, Philly literally ranked dead last in continuity score last year. Dead last. And the Cowboys were bottom 12. So again, we were 7th best. The Cowboys were 12th worst. And the Eagles were the worst as far as availability and continuity. So I think, honestly, we will have the best offensive line in 2021, because in a perfect world, in a vacuum, of course you would just hope everybody's able to stay healthy, but it's football. Everybody doesn't. If you had to put your money on any of these NFC East teams to have the best offensive line in the division by the time December hits, I'm betting my money on the Washington football team. And again, according to all of these advanced statistics, all of these grades, Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Network, Football Outsiders, we also have the potential to just be a top 10 offensive line, just pure talent wise, starting 5, everybody healthy in the NFL. So I'm really excited about this next season, because some people feel like offensive line is one of our biggest weaknesses. It may end up being one of our biggest strengths by the end of the season. You'll see. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Just wanted to present my case as to why the Washington football team will at least have a top 10 offensive line in the NFL this upcoming season. And definitely get in the comment section and let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Do you feel like the Washington football team will have a top 10 offensive line, a top 6, the 3rd best like some of these other professional football analysts feel like? Please get in the comment section and let me know how you feel about all of that. And as always, man, please like this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. I'm pretty sure I at least said one thing you didn't know, so you had to have learned something. So by law, you have to leave a like on this video. And as always, man, I really appreciate all of the support, man. I'm about to get back to getting to this content consistently. Just been extremely busy. Every time I think I'm about to get less busy, I get more busy. But I think I'm for real finally about to have more free time and about to start working on these rookie film sessions before we hit training camp. And as always, man, again, I appreciate all of the support. Shouts out to everybody that donates to the channel. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors, name you see scrolling on the screen right now. A special shouts out to my one All-Pro sponsor, Jaden. Again, content coming out more consistently. I'm about to get back to doing these weekly live streams as well. Sorry I've been missing in action, but we're getting back to it. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.